I come here to serve. I come here to find somebody on methadone that can talk about the hope of this program. I come here to find an old timer who's struggling and the message gone dry. Maybe we can fan the flame of desire. I come here to try to let somebody know that NA still works, no matter if you got 0 days clean or 45 years clean. And so I'm very grateful to be here. And I love, there's men in here that I love dearly. I already mentioned somebody's name. Probably 30 other people are mad now. You know what I mean? And so I want to read a couple of things. I want to do this like a workshop type of deal, right? I want to thank Jimmy. I love you. I love Jimmy very much, man. I went to a meeting, a noon meeting. I was on an 11-step quest. I have several 11-step appointments in my life, my calendar, to pray and meditate and to seek my higher power on a different level. So every year I'm in California for a week. I'm 11th step. So after I do my 11-step stuff, I go to meetings. And I was at a noon meeting because of sponsorship, and Jimmy walks into the room, and he took my life to a different level, just meeting him. You never know when you meet somebody that person is not just a cup of coffee and a time of fellowship. That person might open the door for you to enter a new level of recovery. And he did that to me, and my man Elliot did that for me. And so, all right. So this book, a couple of things I want to say. There's a lot of controversy about the book, right? It's sad how people like me are intimidated, are insecure, are fearful, prideful when new books come out, right? New books come out. The new book came out. I remember when the Step Working Guide came out, I was like, I didn't get no Step Working Guide. I had to figure it out. We had to have California emails. We was doing Etch-a-Sketch step work, like puzzles, I said, so I didn't know that I was intimidated by the new literature. I didn't know that the disease was working. I forgot that the disease don't want information that's going to help me get better. And so when Living Clean came out, it was almost the same, I'm not going to, a new book, I don't need a new book, And addicts are afraid of change. And so I instinctively, without anybody telling me anything, I drew away from the new literature when it came out. And so what happened to me, my friend said, what's up with the new book? I do a workshop. I've been doing a workshop for over 20 years on literature. And they said, you can do the workshop on Living Clean book? And I was like, no, I don't know, But he said, what's wrong? He said, you never got a new bag of drugs? And said, I don't want to open it. You know what I mean? He said, you got new drugs? You said, pop it open. Me first. I go first. You know what I mean? He said, so why don't you do that with recovery? It's like a new bag of spiritual, a hit. You get, there's some. And so we made 100 copies of the book way before, there was a draft in 1983, a workshop. There was a draft in 1983 that's much different than what you see in my hand. Much different. There's several drafts. I don't want to get, this is not like a new work. This is an old work that finally came to pass. It was low on the priority list for the literature committee, and when they were writing the basic text, they said, we know that we're going to need more literature, and they started putting stuff topically aside for addicts. They knew one day we'll come out with more work. 2012, the book finally came out. And so now there's rumors going around that this is not written all by addicts, right? Or it's not, they got different people saying different things about the World Board and this, that. In the book, I trust the book. I love Frankie, I love Jimmy, but I trust the book more than I trust them. You know what I'm trying to say to you? And so if the book says that it's written by addicts for addicts, I trust the book. I know Jimmy has friends in California that have friends, I know Jimmy hangs out with, I trust the book. All right? I told Jimmy, thanks for sharing, but the book says it is, it is written by addicts for addicts. All right? The other thing is that the book is a mature book. It has some serious substance in here. So many people say that it's for the old timer. It's for people who've been around. I understand, but that's not what the book says. you know what I'm saying? I'm a literature guy. My advice can kill somebody. My opinion can really hurt a family really bad. You understand? And I think I'm a smart guy. I've read many books. I'm very, very spiritual. I got a lot of wisdom that I've done some work. And my best thinking can hurt somebody pretty badly. And so I tell my people that be careful with what I say. And if you have to choose between the literature and what Raymond said, always go with the literature. You know? And so this book says, I just want to start off by saying that is an offering. This book, right, is intended both as an offering to new members and to rekindle the passion of our old members. So it's not for any one particular, the red team in NA, you know what I mean? Or it's not just for the guys with the black key tags. No, it talks about sex in here, right? Guys with 3 days have sex, I think. You know what I mean? Maybe they got 90 days. I don't know. You know what I mean? Maybe it doesn't work yet with 3 days. I don't know. But people come here, newcomers come here, and they have children, right? Right? Newcomers come in here and they got family and so this book is a wealth of experience by addicts, from addicts, for addicts, on life issues. You ever heard somebody, I used to say this, I said, well, I got a wife, right? But I don't have no instructions on marriage, right? There's some instructions in the literature. There's some instructions now. I got these kids. I got little Raymond is bigger than me, right? I still call him little Raymond. I don't know what to call him. I'm not going to call him Big Raymond, right? I'm Big Raymond, right? So there goes some more contradiction and confusion in my life, all right? So little Raymond is my son, and I want to be a good parent. I want to know, how to parent him. I want to, and there's stuff in here. It says being a good parent might mean different things to each of us, but whatever we imagine it to be, we want to do it right. I want my son to be freer than I was. I want my son to know it's okay to cry. Men do cry. I want my son to know, it's okay. Let's talk about sex. So parenting. I don't know if you got children, but there's a wonderful literature on parenting. I wish I could go, but we want to be good parents. I don't know, nobody wants to be a bad parent. I want to be a good parent. And so there's information on being a good parent. Now, I have a wife. Some people wake up one day and they say, they got wife and kids, where they came from. You know what I mean? And so and there's information on relationships. There's information on, one of the important thing that it says here about relationships is our relationships with ourselves determines the quality of our relationships with others. That's money. You should buy this book just for that. You know what I mean? Like our relationship with ourselves, right? Depending on the work I've done, my level of self-acceptance, my level of insecurities, my self-loathing, my feeling less than, my ego, my arrogance, depending on where I'm at, because this is what I found. Because the literature, when I got clean, I was, let's say, 18 years old, physically, all right? Emotionally, I was 11 years old. And mentally, I was 60 years old. Because I knew so much stuff. Right? And so what I'm saying to you is that, and we have and talk about the steps. We have tools in NA. The steps help us to, mentally, physically, emotionally, to find a balance. Internal balance. And so this book talks about, and relationships are very important. Beyond that, I've learned, so depending on the relationship with myself, and that's the problem. It doesn't matter how good you sound. It doesn't matter how much you know. Look, check this out. This is interesting. This book is very, very interesting. Right from the beginning, it says something very powerful, right? Because it says this: it's not what we think about our recovery that matters. It's not what you say about recovery that matters. It's not even what you know about recovery that matters. It's not even what you believe about. Check it out. It says it's what we do. It's what we do. It doesn't matter how great Raymond can speak. It doesn't matter how much he could quote literature. It doesn't matter. I got a gift. God gave me a gift that I know how to put myself in the literature. I see that, it's just not an intellectual process. It's intellectual, it's mental, it's emotional, and it's spiritual. And most importantly, I got to live it. If I don't live it, it has no value in my life. If I talk about it wonderfully and everybody all over the world gets blessed, but I can't live it at home, my kids are screwed. You understand what I'm saying? And so this book talks about that. That it's not what you know. Now, listen, knowing is important. How can you do better unless you know better? And so, I'm one of those guys, and it talks that I had to talk the talk long before I walked the walk. It took some time for my feet to catch up to my mouth. You understand? And that's fine. It's an individual and personal journey. So it talks about, okay, that stuff, right? So relationships are important to the old timer and the newcomer. Parenting, if you have children, is important. There's some things here that are vital. So the first draft in 1983, but there was more than one draft, and it was switched up, and they had rules, and they were telling addicts what to do, and addicts don't like to be told what to do. So they switched it up, right? There's 7 chapters, right? You'll find there's 285 pages. You know the deal, the symbols of there's many different sub-chapters, and there's on sex, faith, there's stuff on fear, there's stuff, on relationships outside of NA, which is important to me because I'm a guy. It says when you get clean, right, you stay here for a little while, whatever it is, and you get interest, and you get passions. I only had one passion all my life. It's to get numb, to feel, high. And so now I got passion. I have something that I never had before in my life. I have such a love for drug addicts. I mean, I love you guys, but for drug addicts who are using. Yeah, I don't want to cry on camera, right? But there's freedom from drug addiction. And I want to go in every way possible to let the still using addict know that there's hope after dope, that there's a fellowship, a worldwide fellowship of men, women, young people, different colors, different creeds, different lack of religion, all types of stuff, that there's a place and there's a way and where you can get free, and not just from the drugs. You can find freedom from addiction. And this book talks about that too. It talks about being able to find a passion and an interest. And some of us are part of faith communities, and some of us are part of other organizations, and that we can be pillars, and that we can be above average members of different places. When I'm playing softball, for example, Living Clean told me this, right? It's not gonna. You gotta personalize it, right? When I'm playing softball, I hurt my ankle. Softball is softball. I don't know. It's a sport, right? So anyway, imagine me playing football, but I'm on the bench because I can't play. This book says I can have an impact from the bench, that I can root my fellow players on, that if they mess up, I can say, you get them next time, that I can uplift and have an impact in people's lives. I got clean with a purpose. It says in the first step in the basic text, it says that we can find meaning and purpose in our lives. I found a purpose. And so I'm living clean. The journey continues, right? And it goes on and on. At some point, we're going to have to write about grandparents. One of the big topics is illness. You get addicts, man. We've done some things to our bodies, and some people have not done too much damage to their bodies. It's just illness comes. You don't got to ask for it, and it never comes at an opportune moment. And it talks about illness in here, and it talks about death. But illness is a big thing. I mean, we're losing so many members to stupid medication. We're losing in America, we're losing a lot of members who don't no matter what club, members who opened meetings and started areas and served and gave so many hours of time. We're losing members. They're getting back surgeries. They're getting different things that are happening. They're getting new body, they're getting new shoulders, new knee, and they're getting medication. And it talks about that in here. And in times of illness where we need to respect our disease and don't get overconfident, give the medication to our wives or husband or someone say, listen, I got to take 2 every 4 hours, not 4 every 2 hours. Tell somebody that, and to be humble and say, listen, because the disease is always going to check in to see if you're ready to check out. And it talks about our bodies don't know the difference between street drugs prescribed by ourselves and drugs that are that we need prescribed by doctors. And so it talks about illness in here. And, so I'm telling you some of the things that I've been through. Right? I never really talk about my illness, but I have severe heart problems. I had 13 surgeries. I had open heart surgery. I got 3 holes in my heart. Half of my heart is swollen or enlarged. I have a leaky valve. And my heart does 3 times the work of. So people say, it's not because I'm fat I'm sweating. My heart is, I can sit down and sweat. My heart is palpitating 3 times. So anyway, I got to deal with illness. And it says some of us choose to ignore it, which was, I ignored it when I was 18 and 19 and 20. I was young, I was dumb, and now I'm 41, I can't ignore it so much. Now it's knocking on my door saying, we got to take care of this. And so some of us choose to ignore it, and some of us, don't deal with it so well. So anyway, so there's illness in recovery. You might not be ill, but you might have a friend that's ill, or you might be going through illness. It talks about how to deal with illness and recovery. There's a way, and here's the thing that's important. I'm trying not to get too passionate, right? We're going to relax. It says that NA offers us a path, a process, and a way of life. A path to follow, a process to participate in, and a way of life. The disease is off the path, right? It could be a religious zeal, and in America, we're very concerned with people going on a religious zeal. They find a higher power, and then they go someplace to worship, which is great. We don't want, go wherever you got to go, but come back here, and when you come back here, keep speaking our language, all right? We don't know NA language. All right, and so and I'm not. This book talks about that. It says some of our members go outside in spirituality or religion, and they go out there, and then they come in here and they speak in language we don't understand no more. They got the anointing and the flesh, and what is that? You know what I mean? And so please, when you come, but some people, and so we live in religious zeal. It talks about leaving on a social zeal. Some people come in here with nothing. And now they got a diploma in university, and they got a job and a promotion, and they got not only they got a flat, they bought a house, And the disease loves to use good things that we get from NA to pull us away from NA, and it warns us about that. And recently, I was just talking to someone I love from London here, a young lady, and she's about an addict who died. Addicts die. It sucks, but it's true. And it talks about it here, the literature, right? It says, death, dying, and living with grief. I've buried a lot of people since I've been clean. And maybe you don't know what it is to have coffee or tea with someone one day and then putting on a black suit to pay respects 5 days later. I've been through that a lot. This disease is a dirty, filthy killer. And so it says that, the first line, it says, addicts die. Addicts die. And it says, we talk about it in our literature. We remind ourselves at every meeting that the ends of our disease are jail, institution, and death. But when one of us dies, we generally respond the way anyone else would, with shock. And let me tell you what happened to me. I had 2 close friends die last year. I had 2 close friends die. I met them both when they were using. And I like to root for the newcomer. I like to root for the guy. And, we went for coffee, and we went to meetings, and I gave him my jacket. I didn't do nothing special for him that nobody didn't do for me. But I was there, and we built a relationship, and I was rooting for him in his corner. And the disease, you put down the drugs, the disease. It says, after coming to NA, we realized we were sick people. And he put on, and the voices, thanks, Jimmy, and the voices, and my friend Brad jumped in front of a train and killed himself, and it hurt, and it still hurts. And it's not the first time. I found 3 different occasions I found addicts hanging, they hung themselves and killed themselves, And I feel like I'm crazy. I hear the disease laughing at me when addicts die. And it bothers me. And so I have a friend named Gary who got cancer. And the illness overwhelmed him. And he got caught up with self-pity. And it talks about in this book that when we start thinking that life is not fair and that why did this happen to us, when we start saying those things and feeding our negativity, we're only going to go to self-pity and desperation. Because desperation is when you lose all hope. And we got to find gratitude no matter what we're going through. You know, the guy with no shoes was complaining about not having no shoes. I got no shoes. I got no shoes. So he ran into the guy who had no feet. You know? And so what happened to me was this. The feeling that it doesn't pay to care so much about people. The sense that loving addicts only results in loss and hurt. That's what happened to me. And so I felt like I wanted to pull away. Because when I love, you know, I love Elliot. He's an old man, you know, 67 years old. You know, he got more hair than me. You know what I mean? But I love him. I love Hart. I love Jimmy. You know? I love the guys. I know that these are gifts from God, the people that I have in my life. And so sometimes you got to love someone to the point where you got to grieve them. And you got to let them go. And you got to love them all the way to the end. And so death, so even talks about death in this literature. You let me know when I got 5 minutes. It talks about death in this literature and how to grieve. And then we go through shock. We go through anger. There's a process. And that grieving is a lifelong process. You know, when I buried my mother, I don't know if you know this, but my name is Spiritual Raymond. Right? I've spoken all over the world. I'm a world convention speaker. I travel internationally outside of NA. You know, I've helped, you know, all this wonderful helping people resume. When I buried my mother, I went into a cave emotionally. I didn't know that cave existed. I told my friends, I want her to pass already so that she could stop suffering. And it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to imagine it. It's one thing to think that you know, but there's nothing to go through it. And I went to a cave. And I wanted to use. After many years clean, I didn't want to use to get high. I wanted to use to numb the pain. I knew my mother was in a better place. I knew that God had healed her, the ultimate healing. No more doctors, no more radiation, no more chemo, no more hitting her face, no more crying. I understood that, but my heart was in pain. And my heart was, you know, and I say that to say that the literature, you know, it talks about it in here. It says that sometimes when we're grieving and we go through stuff, we find ourselves instinctively drawing away from the things we need the most. You know, it says when you're going through, and I don't care what kind of program Raymond works, he cannot control his heart. I got to be able to survive my emotions. And I can't tell the heart, you know, well, we're just going to read this book and it's going to be okay. No. The heart says, well, I'm going to fill your eyes with tears so you can't read the book. Well, I'm going to pray. Well, I'm going to flood your mind with thoughts. You know, there's things that happen. And so it says that we find ourselves instinctively drawn away when we need to press in now the most. And if you ever read the third step in the working guide, it says, you know, there's a paragraph where it says, you know, we find a higher power, life is great, you know, we're drinking proper tea, you know, we got, you know, we're doing, everything is wonderful in the third step. And then the next line says, then something happens. It could be a death, a loss of a job, a breakup of a relationship. It says it feels like we've been kicked in the stomach. Bless you. And so I got the 5 minute sign. I'll share the last thing that's important. You know, I was going to talk about, you know, it talks about here, you know, forgiveness. You know, there's a big, you know, we're doing the 8th and 9th step retreat, and we're going to be talking about, for so many years, I was trapped by my past. For so many years, I had such hate for some people that hurt me so profoundly, and I could not let it go. I didn't know, like, to forgive them, like, does that make it okay, what they did? You know, I forgive them, forgive and forget. Like, how do I forget the scars that have deeply cut into my heart? Like, that's easy for you to say. And so I battle with forgiveness, and I don't have, you know, time to read it, you know, but forgiveness is very liberating. Forgiveness doesn't say what the person did is okay. Forgiveness frees me and stops them from hurting me over and over and over again. And so I was going to touch that, but I'll touch this and I'm going to close. This is in the chapter Jimmy was talking about, growing pains. It says here, keep coming back no matter what, right? Many of the challenges we face have concrete symptoms. All right, this is a little bit of important. Many of the challenges we have concrete symptoms, but are actually spiritual in nature. All right, listen. Many of the challenges we face have concrete symptoms, but are actually spiritual in nature. It's hard to spot a spiritual crisis. Usually, it's disguised as a crisis in our relationships, finance, career, or family. Now, this is very important. Spiritual in nature. My problems are spiritual in nature. If I keep trying to fix the outside and not address my spirit, I'm talking about the spirit, and I'll say this, and look at what the 11th step says. It says, when our spiritual needs are met, not Googled, not read about, not listened to CD, not when our spiritual needs are met, not religion, when our spiritual needs are met, whatever that means to the individual, that I don't know what that means for you, but I figured out what it means for me. And when my spiritual needs are met, my living problems are reduced to a point of comfort. That's so powerful, people don't understand what that means. When our spiritual needs are met, our living problems are reduced to a point of comfort. So many times we have problems on the inside and we seek an outside solution, only creating more and more problems until life becomes unbearable, forget unmanageable, and disease takes us out. I encourage you to read. It's a very powerful book. Thank you, Frankie, and the group for putting this on. I'm an addict. My name is Raymond. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. Thank you.